How did John Summit blow up so fast? How did John Summit just skyrocket to success, being one of the biggest DJs and EDM acts in the entire world almost overnight? In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 things that John Summit did to blow up and become one of the biggest DJs so quick. One thing I want to say before I get into this is this video is going to be a very fireside chat style video. There's not going to be any crazy jump cut editing, any kind of things coming in and out and whatnot. I wanted to make this video because I've gotten so many comments and questions, a lot from friends and people I know saying, hey Mark, who's this John Summit guy I feel like I see everywhere? I feel like I haven't even heard of this DJ, and all of a sudden he's headlining the biggest festivals in the world. Everybody is talking about John Summit. And I'm going to be honest, for a very, very good reason. He's super talented, works super hard, and a lot more. But there's 5 really unique things that John Summit did that really blew him up and took him from here to infinity almost overnight. Number 1, he focuses on the same style. This is important to mention, and I'm going to go in depth about each of these 5 topics. And like I said, I'm going to treat this video as if me and you are hanging out and you say, hey man, how this John Summit guy just blow up so quick, right? Very, very casual style video. And this is the main topic I want to start with. Probably the most important, and that is this. John Summit, at least in the beginning, which is something that's very important to remember, really focused on house music. That was his thing. I'd say if I had to go more specific, more tech house, right? And this is important for a lot of artists to understand that in the beginning, yes, maybe when you blow up, you might be able to play any genre that you want. But in the beginning, it's super important, both psychologically and business-wise, which I'll talk about, to really focus on the same style. Not as much the same sound per se, although I think that's important, but really focusing on the same style. That's why a lot of artists who do blow up really are known for one thing, and then they get bigger, right? And there's a few different reasons to this. This is something I would highly suggest for a lot of artists to kind of break down and understand, that the more specific you can be about the genre of music you DJ, your type of performances, the type of music you produce and release, the better off you're going to be. Because if I said to you, like, hey, who's known for Moomerton? Oh, well, Dylan Francis. And then now Dylan Francis produces whatever. Dubstep, you have Skrillex. Bass House, you have Jaws. Marshmallow, you have like future pop or future bass, right? All these artists were known for that one particular genre or sound or style. And then once they kind of blew up, they can do their own thing. And this comes down to, I think, if anything, more to a business perspective than actual creative perspective. For 2 different reasons, like I said, psychologically and business-wise. So getting into that, and again, this is super important. This is what John Summit did super, super well, is with John Summit, whether it's his DJ performance or his music, you know what to expect every time. That's not a bad thing. That's a really good thing. You have a certain expectation. Now, of course, his sets are pretty much all improv. He's talked about this. He does custom intros sometimes a couple hours before his set. So yes, to an extent, you don't know what to expect, what he's going to play musically, but you have an idea of the type of vibe, the style he will play, right? And yes, of course, he will throw people off. That's part of DJing and being a very good DJ, but you do know what to expect. And here's a good analogy, is McDonald's, which, by the way, am I the only one? I know a lot of people have talked about this. Why is McDonald's so expensive now, right? I don't know what it is. But anyway, like you go to McDonald's, what do you expect? Burgers and fries, right? And let's say one day you go and you say, hey, I'd like a burger. And they're like, no, we're selling sushi today. And you'd be like, wait, you're McDonald's. What do you mean you're selling sushi? And they're like, oh, we're selling sushi today. And you're like, all right, that's kind of weird. You go back the next day, they're selling burgers and fries. You're like, all right, that makes, I feel like, more sense. It's McDonald's. I go there for a burger. And then let's say you go back there the next day, and they're like, oh yeah, today we're selling tacos. You're like, what? But you had sushi. I thought you were known for burgers, and then you had sushi, and now you have tacos. I don't feel like I can trust. I don't know what to expect when I get McDonald's. This is a very good analogy for what's going on with a lot of musicians. And I'll even talk about myself in this point that I feel like, let me take a sip of some water. My throat is a bit scratchy today. Been doing like a lot of filming. But this is, again, using a personal example, I may have, and I think I have, shot myself in the foot, that my first kind of 3 big songs I was known for, 3 or 4, was a dubstep song, a big room song, and then a Moombahton song. Those are my first kind of songs that I remember like people started searching for or getting to know me as an artist. And if you think about it, very similar to McDonald's, dubstep, you have burgers. Moombahton, you have, I'm making stuff up, maybe not the best analogy. You have sushi, and then tacos, you have big room or whatever, right? If you listen to me as an artist and you go on my Spotify, this is something that I've kind of messed up on a little bit, being honest. You kind of don't know what to expect. It might be a dubstep song, it might be a big room song. I've even done cinematic records. I've done all these different things. And once you become a massively big established artist, well, you have a little more freedom, I think. But in the beginning, psychologically, people kind of like to know that if they follow you on Spotify, if they go to your shows, they have a general idea of what to expect, right? And that's why when it comes to John Summit, he did this very, very well, where everything he released, every DJ set he had was straight down the lane of house. Now, I've seen him drop trap records, dubstep records, techno records, pretty much every other genre that he wants to, because he has the freedom now. He's John Summit. His name is so big, he can do what he wants. But in the beginning, he was very, very good to build that following that psychologically, people like to follow people that they know exactly what to expect every single time. People will initially start liking you as an artist for your music first, personality second, which is something I will talk about a little bit later in this video, but this is important to understand as well. Yes, there are some people that, especially now with John Summit having such a massive following, he could drop a meditative record, a new age record, and people love it because people love John Summit and they follow him for anything he wants. But in the beginning, for most artists, they're just going to follow you for your music because they like your music. Then maybe who you are as an artist in general, secondly, and you'll have those dedicated fans that listen to pretty much everything you drop. But firstly, psychologically, it's just huge to really release the same type of music. Stick within that genre or that niche in general until you get a lot bigger. The second thing is business-wise. I know it's a big thing in music right now. It's kind of like the cool thing to say is like, oh, I'm genreless. And to an extent, I think that, yes, that's huge, right? Like for me, my sets are all over the place. But in the beginning, that can actually hurt you from a business perspective because every tour manager, every booking agent has to look at an artist and say, okay, we have Excision performing, and like I said, we have John Summit performing. Who should this artist open for? Well, if they're more bassy, we pick Excision. If they're more housey, we pick John Summit, right? But if you're like, oh, I play everything, a booking agent's like, well, one, I don't know if I can trust you. Like, I don't want you opening for Excision with a house set. I feel like that wouldn't make sense. But two, a booking agent might not know where to put you. They're like, well, should we put him in as an opener for John Summit, or should we pick another artist? Would Diplo make more sense? Or I don't know. They're kind of free form. Like, they don't know where to put you. And then if they don't know where to put you, yet they have another artist that's clearly just bass music or clearly just house music, they'll pick that artist instead. Granted, it does depend on following and whatnot, but they will pick that artist instead because they know exactly what to expect. And from a business perspective, remember, the music industry is a business. From that perspective, they'll be able to say, you know what, this artist should definitely open for this artist. So in the beginning, and this is something John Summit did very, very well, is every single time when it comes to his music and DJ sets, you knew exactly what to expect. Number 2, DJing over producing. This may be the most unpopular opinion I may say on this video, the most controversial or debatable. But I have, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, and I'm not exaggerating, gone through probably thousands of hours of footage of interviews and DJs. Like, I've studied a tremendous amount of DJs in terms of how they blew up. Like, I went through this huge phase where every artist you can think of, from the big ones to the lesser known ones, I watched and studied videos and interviews and blog articles and did some research. How did this artist blow up? How can I replicate that so I myself can also blow up, right? Trying to like see if there's a method to the madness, so to speak. And I found and I broke it down among a lot of different ways to mainly two different things. One, you produce a phenomenal record that blows up. I think one classic example that I always think of is Say My Name by Porter Robinson that blew him up. Skrillex found him. He booked Porter Robinson and brought him on to Alsa. The rest is history, right? Or DJing, where you're DJing for a while and you then say, you know what, okay, I'm gonna start producing, right? Because I'm DJing so much. I think Party Favor is an example I think of that, where he's a phenomenal DJ and then started producing, et cetera, right? And it's tough because if someone came to me and said, hey, Mark, am I better off being a DJ, focusing on making really, really good gigs and really good turntablism and the craft of DJing and making a really good show? Or should I focus more on producing? I'd say both. My initial answer would be like, you gotta do both. But if you had to press me, which one should I pick more? I would say DJing. Definitely DJing. Now, John Summit did do both. He worked his butt off being a really good DJ, while also producing his own music. But I think one thing John Summit did very, very well is he DJ'd gig after gig after gig after gig after show after show. And that's a big thing I think not a lot of artists do. That's something, again, using some personal examples, I was mainly just DJing tons of shows. And then I completely stopped being like, no, I gotta produce. And I kind of regret doing that. I had a lot of steam where back in the day, I had some blogs even covering me. And then I kind of was like, no, I gotta produce my music. And my music's now doing very, very well. But the thing is, when you DJ a lot of shows, it just one show after the other allows a lot of people to say, oh, who's this guy? Who's this girl? I want to follow them. It allows you to build a bigger fan base in general. Also, too, you're getting paid. You can get to that point where you might be able to live off fully your DJ gigs, which I feel like for a lot of musicians, the first step of making it as an artist is being able to live off what you're doing musically, is being able to live off your music and all the stuff you're doing, right? I think that's making it for a lot of artists, at least in the beginning. And what John Summit did so well is he did DJ gig after DJ gig after DJ gig. This also, then again, there's a lot I can go into on this video, but this also allows you to meet a lot of artists. A lot of artists say, oh, this is a really good DJ, he's a really good opener. You start talking to them. Let's say you release a couple records, you can give them out as demos. It's a good way to network and build your connections. There's just so much to DJing, and I will say that if let's say someone came to me and they're like, hey, Mark, I'm a new artist, and I produce tech house music, right? Like John Summit. What should I do now? I would say focus on getting as many DJ gigs as you can. Put together like a really good 1 hour set, create an EPK, DJ as many gigs as you can, just over and over again. Because if you think about it, once your producing song blows up, unless you're a massive artist, which I think is kind of harder to do now just down the music route, you're going to have to perform inevitably. So get good at performing, reading a crowd, how to mix well, right? How to just understand and navigate the whole performing aspect. Do that a lot, because once you start DJing a lot, that's going to open up, in my opinion, so many more doors. And then that way, once you do release a really good record, boom, it can go out there, right? And I think especially now, and this is kind of a harsh truth, I think it's harder now to create a song or a record that's so good that just blows up. Even if, let's say you make a song that's just mind-blowing production. I'm talking mind-blowing production. It's probably going to get drowned out in the noise. There's so many people now releasing music via DistroKid or on SoundCloud. There's never been more music now in the world that even if you make a straight-up banger, the chance of being heard is tough. Even for labels, too. A lot of labels say, you know what? And this is kind of like a harsh thing. This is a great song. It's a great record, but they have 100 followers. We have this other song that's super mainstream and super cliche, but this person has 10,000 followers. Labels will sometimes choose the person with the bigger following, no matter how good your song is, right? And of course, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, it is all about the music, and you should be producing as much as you can, but I think that you should be DJing even more so. And this is what John Summit did super, super well, doing DJ gig after DJ gig, and that is why when he performs now, he's so good. Almost every one of his sets are different. He's a phenomenal mixer, knows how to read a crowd, knows how to keep people engaged. I mean, he does like 7 or 8 hour sets at Club Space in Miami all the time, right? Which is still crazy to me. Like, he'll start at 4 or 5 in the morning, go till noon or 1, then the after party starts at 3, right? It's crazy. And all that expertise of being that kind of DJ has just come from years, right? The whole 10,000 hour rule, right? That's been brought up a lot. I think it was Maxim Gladwell, I think, or Malcolm Gladwell, I think, the book Outliers, who said the 10,000 hour rule. But yeah, I mean, DJ gig after DJ gig, again, if someone came into me, I would say, although there's a lot of talk about producing, start getting DJ gigs and DJ as much as you can. Any single time DJ happens, any single time, a DJ gig happens and you're DJing, post on social media, create hype, be like, oh, I'm performing here now, I'm performing here, I'm performing here. Get that ball rolling and continue it rolling as much as you can. Number 3, social media. This is the one that I feel like artists feel very mixed about, because I know some artists are like, I don't want to have to do a bunch of stuff on Twitter or Instagram, creating these Instagram reels or YouTube videos. And then other artists are the opposite, being like, oh, you know what? I kind of like it. It's kind of fun, right? Regardless of how you feel, this is a harsh, aggressively harsh truth. If you're not doing a lot on social media and you're not marketing your music, the chance of you blowing up and actually making it is unbelievably slim. I have friends in the industry who are very big kind of behind the scenes, if that makes sense. Like, you wouldn't know their name as an artist, but if you work in the industry, you're like, oh, of course I know who that is. And I remember talking to one of them, and I said, yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like, what would you say as an artist? Like, should they be DJing? Should they be, making music, producing? She said, look, all I would do if I was trying to make it in the EDM world now is I would DJ a lot and post a lot on social media. Forget producing. Produce here and there, get good, but I know a lot of artists, and she even mentioned this, and this is kind of like a harsh truth of the industry. She goes, I know a lot of artists blew up as a DJ, use social media, they hired ghost producers, started releasing their own records as ghost produced records. Then they got good at producing, and then they started making their own records, and then they started, blah, 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 right? The big thing right now, I hate to say it, is like 75% marketing, right? And that's why I mentioned DJing earlier, that if you think about it, if you market yourself saying, hey, I'm doing this DJ gig now and stuff like that, that's going to be huge. What John Summit did so well, as most people know, is he really went hard on social media. I remember that's actually the first time I heard about him, was I think Twitter. I think it was Twitter's the first time I heard about him, about all this kind of stuff he was talking about. He was super active on Twitter a lot, and he still is. Super active on Instagram. He was somebody that, no matter where you were from an EDM perspective, was somehow always being mentioned. And if you think about it, that's a huge way to blow you up and skyrocket your success as an artist. Doing these kind of social media reels, constantly posting things on Twitter, like going really hard about your marketing is a huge way to blow you up as an artist. And I think this is something a lot of artists don't do as much, because you're like, I think a lot of artists are like, I don't really care about like social media or all this kind of stuff. I'm just like, And to an extent, I get it. I do get it. You're not trying to become like Instagram famous. You're not trying to be an influencer, right? But if people don't know about you, it doesn't matter how good your music is or anything, social media is super important. And this is something I think John Summit really pioneered super well, that once that kind of attention snowball, so to speak, got rolling, a lot more people started following John Summit and reposting his stuff, reposting the stories of his shows and his gigs. Even when he released a new song, it was everywhere, right? And so this is something he pioneered a lot, that his marketing team, and of course him himself, just started mentioning him in everywhere they could. And again, I know some people argue, and I know John Summit, it's kind of tough, because I feel like people don't give him the credit he should, because he kind of seamlessly blew up out of nowhere. And to an extent, I see their point. I will talk about this a bit later in this video. And to an extent, I see their point. But also, I think John Summit just did it very, very, very well, right? He works super, super hard. Overnight success takes 10 years is a very classic quote in business and the creative world as well. But he worked super, super hard and did a lot of marketing. And I think this is why a lot of artists are like, how come John Summit blew up so fast? It's like, well, he was doing very, very well with his marketing and his social media management. He was constantly engaging with his fans. When a lot of other artists are like, I'm just going to produce a song. He was constantly engaging with his fans, engaging on social media, posting a lot on TikTok and Instagram and all these different places. And I've talked about this before in other videos, but again, I know it's kind of like a harsh truth for a lot of artists, but in this day and age, in the world we're living in now, you just got to be on social media and you got to market yourself a lot more. Number 4, targeted approach. This is one I feel like a lot of musicians kind of do, but also kind of don't at the same time. And what I'm talking about here is doing not necessarily all this work, but doing the right work. This is something I've learned from Tim Ferriss. I highly suggest for a lot of musicians, I don't know why a lot of musicians don't do this, study business, right? Obviously, I went to business school. One of my favorite business books, which I think every artist should read, is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And in case you, to kind of word it super simply, in case you've never studied business, but one thing I suggest for a lot of musicians is look at you, the artist being the business and your product being your music, your DJ performances, etc., etc. And Tim Ferriss, very, very famous entrepreneur, said that when it comes to startups, when it comes to companies that make it, a lot of time it's not about how hard they work. Because let's be honest, in this day and age, we're kind of in the hustle culture. Whether you're a musician, you're an actor, you're an entrepreneur, whatever. It's not about who works the hardest. It's about knowing how to do the right type of work. And he talked about this in 4-Hour Workweek. And I think he called it W for W, work for work, or work for work's sake. There are a lot of musicians I've noticed, and I've seen this in the music industry, the acting industry, entrepreneurs. They'll work hard, but I think it's a trap. And I think the people who work the hardest can easily trick themselves into thinking, oh, I'm working hard. This means I'm going to make it, without realizing they're not doing the right type of work. Think of it kind of like using, I hate to use this analogy, like a gun example, as using a shotgun approach, being like, oh, I'm going to do all these different types of work and maybe I'll make it, and blah, blah, blah. Or as opposed to a sniper who's like, I'm going to do one ultra specific thing and all my work, all my attention is to one specific thing. I think if anything, I'm just making numbers up, you're better off working 5 hours on an ultra specific thing than working, like say 7 or 8 hours and you're working on some things over here for an hour and some things over here for an hour, blah. What John Summit did super well is he had a very targeted approach. He's like, one, I'm going all in on DJing specifically. 2, I'm going all in on house and especially tech house. And then 3, he's like, everything I do, all my work is gonna be targeted just for that. Just for that. Every little thing I do, every ounce of my being that I'm putting into my work is gonna be ultra targeted. I watched a video recently, a phenomenal video, also a phenomenal channel. I wanna give him a shout out called Audio Eats. I'll post it in the description below. They did a video more about the history of how John Summit blew up. They kind of do, I don't know if you remember, I don't know if they're still doing these videos, but there was a channel on YouTube called How Do They Become Famous, right? Audio Eats does that, but for EDM artists. So he did that for like deadmau5, Subtronics, Rez, and he did one about John Summit. And I learned in that video that for Defected Records, which is, I think, I'd say probably the label that really blew John Summit up, for Defected Records, John Summit sent them 50 demos, roughly about 50 demos before they signed him. That's crazy. I mean, think about that. Demo after demo after demo. That's, for most artists, 5 full-length albums of music that John Summit did because he wanted to be released on Defected. That was his like exact sniper-like vision. And what did he do? That's all he honed in on. In addition to performing and everything, he's like, I'm going to release and make a song after song after song after song after song after song, specifically with the intention in mind of releasing it specifically on Defected Records. And then according to Audio Eats on that video, which again is a phenomenal video, again about the history of John Summit, I think it was the track Deep End that they signed, and then that kind of what blew him up because it went huge on Beatport, and the rest is history, right? And that's a huge targeted like approach because a lot of musicians say, oh, I want to DJ main stage. Of course, who doesn't, right? But then it's like, how can you take that a step further? And they're like, well, I want to DJ main stage, but I want to be known for big room house music. I'm just making stuff up. It's like, okay, well, go a step further. Like, well, okay. And then let's say you have that same approach. Like, you know what? I want to release on Revealed Records, owned by Hardwell, and I want to make big room house music kind of blended with techno because that's the sound I like the most. And I'm going to make songs like that, specifically in that super specific style, but I'm going to do that again and again and again and again. And I'm going to work hard. Like, I hate to say it, I've met a lot of, I'd say like A-list DJs or like famous DJs or people well known. They work hard. Everyone works hard. I hate to say it. I know it's a thing that some artists say, oh, you don't get it. I work a lot. So does everybody else. I know it's a harsh truth, but this is something I wish, someone told me a while ago. It's not about how hard you work, although that's part of it. It's about how targeted is your work specifically, right? And like I said, releasing and sending 50 demos to the exact same label with every song being roughly about the same style, that is a targeted, aggressively targeted approach to get exactly what you want. And that's something that John Summit did super well. So I'd say to you, like, almost think of it kind of like the, what are they called? The dolls, where you open one, there's another one, then you open one, there's another one. I can't remember what they're called, right? But when it comes to you kind of like doing your goals or setting your dreams or setting your vision of you as an artist, try to unlayer that a lot more. Don't just say, I want to be a big artist, because every artist does that. Try to go as deep as you can, taking those dolls out, I guess is a weird analogy. So you can be super specific of, like I said, John Summit, not just being like, oh, I want to be a DJ. Well, he wants to be a DJ. Then you said, I want to be a house DJ. Actually, more specific, tech house. Okay, now I want to be a tech house DJ with, like, say, those, like, really rolling bass lines and stuff like that. Okay, well, I don't just want to be DJing in terms of Chicago stuff, but there's one label I really like. And then he goes a step further, right? He's like, all right, well, I want to release on Defective Records. Boom. That's a very specific goal. Super pigeonholed, sniper-like focus. And that's what made John Summit become John Summit. And number 5, luck. Now, I have to be careful here because I think it's tough to talk about luck, really, where I'm not trying to diminish John Summit's talent, his work ethic, his genius to social media, his unbelievably smart, focused approach like I just talked about. But I think it is important to mention, I am planning maybe at some point doing a video about luck because I know it's a very like touchy topic, right? Both in the music industry, the acting industry, of course, entrepreneurship. There's a lot. And luck, I think itself, is a complicated word when you talk about a big dream. It is a complicated word. And there's 3 quotes I want to mention about luck that, I'll say those and then bring it back to John Summit. And one by Tim Ferriss, who I just talked about. He said that, I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit, single-minded people or average people tend to overestimate how important luck is. They think, oh, they just got lucky. I know for me, there's been some, even my closest friends, who said, oh, Mark just got lucky. Mark just got lucky, right? They overestimate. They think everything's about luck. At the same time, creative people underestimate how important luck is. I think it's a big thing I used to say back in the day, oh, luck doesn't exist. Luck doesn't exist. No, I hate to say it does exist. Regardless of how creative you are, regardless of how hard you work, there is a certain element when it comes to being successful that luck is, whether we like it or not, an unfortunate part of that equation. It's just the way the world is, right? Even Demouse called it the roll of the dice that is life, right? In one of his videos and streams I posted on this channel. Second quote I want to mention is by Chris Sacca, one of the most famous investors of all time. And he said, and I love this quote, I may have gotten lucky, but it wasn't by accident. And I think that is actually a really good way to look at it. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the third quote I'm going to say, which I don't know who said this. It's kind of like one of those general quotes, or I don't know who said it. And that is, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I say that because a lot of times people will look at someone like John Summit and say, and this was kind of tough. Well, he got lucky. He got lucky. He has this. He's a good-looking guy, which he is, and he just got lucky. I both agree and disagree at the same time. There is no denying that there's a certain element of the success equation. Let's talk about DJing now. Although this exists in other industries, there's an element of the success of a DJ when you look at their equation that's out of your control. And one of those big elements is luck. It's a huge thing out of your control, and I know it's super frustrating. And there are some artists, you take 10 artists, they all do the same exact thing. They all work super hard. Some of them will inevitably become bigger or less big, even if all things are created equal, because of this kind of magical, unfortunate thing out of our control called luck. On the other end, though, when you look at a lot of artists who made it and blown up and all this kind of stuff, even if you add luck into the equation, there is something that they did to optimize their success. There is something that they did that they're like, yeah, I know luck is part of it, but I'm going to, like I said, work harder, because the harder I work, the luckier I get. If I send out 10 emails as opposed to 500 emails, who do you think, even with luck being involved, is going to have a higher chance of something big happening? The person who sent out 500 emails. If I'm going to send 5 demos to Defective Records as opposed to 50, yeah, there's a certain element of luck involved of which one's going to get picked, right, given the chance. But which one increases that chance of that luck being in their favor, right? And this is why things like working hard, which I was going to do as a point on this video, but I decided not to. Like I said, every DJ works hard. So me saying, oh, make sure you work hard is the most cliche advice. And that's why I said, don't just work hard, be targeted in what you're doing. I think is, if anything, more important than just working hard, right? But when it comes to luck, I think it's tough for a lot of musicians to kind of wrap their head around. It depends I guess who you ask, but I think a lot of musicians like to act that luck doesn't exist, because it's kind of unfortunate. It does kind of suck, for lack of a better word, that something like that, which can have a big effect on someone's career, is out of your control. You can control how hard you work. You can control what you work on. You can control the type of music you make. You can control the type of DJ gigs you have. You can control your social media marketing. But luck, you really can't. But the thing you can control related to luck is the way you can increase that luck happening. And this is something John Summit did very, very well, because I know a lot of people have said, oh, John Summit just got lucky and he blew up. And yes, I think there is an element of luck that made John Summit become John Summit. There are a lot of DJs who are, I think, just as good as John Summit, and a lot of DJs who are doing house music as well, releasing records. And yes, you can say there's a certain element of luck to John Summit becoming John Summit. I think this is also why he gets, in my opinion, an unnecessary amount of hate, which I believe all the hate that John Summit gets, I think, is all jealousy. I'll be honest, I genuinely think it's all jealousy. He is super talented. He did work super hard. He was very strategic in the work that he did. He does work a lot in his DJ sets for every DJ set to become a very, very unique thing, right? I've seen some DJs, and I'm not going to say names, but I've seen some artists 2 or 3 times. So I'm like, oh, it's the same effing set. And I'm like, wait a minute. They're about to do this transition, right? Oh, yeah, there it is. There's that transition. I knew they were going to do it. Well, John Summit, every set's different. He works a lot to make his shows very interesting and captivating. And this is why a lot of people go to John Summit shows, because although, yes, like I said earlier, which is kind of a bit of a paradox, you know what type of music to expect, housey music. But you also, at the same time, don't know what to expect, and you're in suspense, being like, what songs is he going to play? What transitions? Is he going to add in a new idea? I know he's working on a new album, for example. I think it's going to be released, later this year. I'm not sure. Right? So he's doing all these different things. And so the reason why I want to mention luck is that both things are true at the same time. On one end, yes, there is a certain element of luck that's undeniable that made John Summit become John Summit. At the same time, on the other end, it's also undeniable that John Summit did a lot of tremendously amazing work, super hard work, focused work, to optimize that luck, to turn him from just being a casual house DJ to being one of the biggest DJs in the world.